Holy Gospel according to Mark, the 9th chapter. Jesus left with his disciples and started through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know about it because he was teaching the disciples that the Son of Man would be handed over to people who would kill him. But 3 days later, he would rise to life. The disciples did not understand what Jesus meant. They were afraid to ask. Jesus and his disciples went to his home in Capernaum. After they were inside the house, Jesus asked them, "What were you arguing about along the way?" They had been arguing about which one of them was the greatest, and so they did not answer. After Jesus sat down and told the 12 disciples to gather around him, he said, "If you want the place of honor, you must become a slave and serve others." Then Jesus had a child stand near him. He put his arm around the child and said, "When you welcome even a child because of me, you welcome me. And when you welcome me, you welcome the one who sent me." The Gospel of our Lord. You may be seated. So, one of these days, I'm going to get myself in big trouble for having fun with the Scriptures. I'm going to get in knee-deep trouble, or worse, I'm sure. But the saying of Jesus that we read today in the Gospel just lends itself to a wonderful Three Stooges episode. I mean, really, think about this. The ruler of a country, or the president of a big corporation, let's do the president of a corporation, is throwing a great big dinner party one day. And he invites all these people to come in, and the dining room is set up with all the finest linen and the finest china and the finest silver. Flames are dancing off the top of the candles and reflecting in the highly polished candle holders. The most incredible aromas are wafting from the kitchen. And people, dressed in the fashions of the wealthy, stand around with their glass of wine and some fancy hors d'oeuvre, talking to one another about all the important things of business, or about where their children are going to kindergarten, or something like that. And then, of course, in walks Larry, Moe, and Curly, wearing nothing but the finest tuxedo that one could find at the local Salvation Army. Now, off stage, someone rings a dinner bell, or whatever it is that the upper echelon use to call one to dinner when it's served. And everybody heads to dinner. Now, here's where the fun begins. Because if the president of the corporation is the greatest of all, should he sit down first or last? Should he serve the others dinner, or should he be served? And if somebody else in the dinner party happens to think that they're greater than the president, well, then they're going to fight and say, "No, I'm the one that should serve, not you. You sit down. I'm greater than you." And soon, all these people are arguing with each other, saying, "No, I'm the one that should serve. I'm the greatest. I want to be the greatest." And of course, now remember, the Three Stooges are there, so therefore, a food fight commences. I mean, it just has to be. That's the way it works. And suddenly, in the midst of this lavish dinner, there's food flying all over the place. There's this Cornish hen flying across the room. Somebody says, "I said I would serve you because I'm greater, so here are your potatoes." Thwack! Well, bottom line is then no one gets to eat. All right, so that's a little silly, or a lot silly. But to what extent do we insist on proving that we are the best Christian around, that we're the best Christians here? I mean, it's kind of ironic if you stop and think about it. The heading in my Bible that I've got at home, the heading for this particular section is Humility, the Secret of Greatness. I like that. Humility, the secret of greatness. Sometimes it is necessary to let someone else serve you. And in doing that, you become quite humble. If you have any questions about that, come to our Maundy, Thursday service and let someone wash your feet. It's a very humbling experience. But you have to let other people serve you sometimes. But seriously, somehow I really doubt that Jesus was worried about who was going to serve whom. I don't think Jesus was worried about who was going to serve at coffee hour that Sunday morning or Sabbath day or whatever. Now, as thankful as we are for those who are willing to make coffee and serve it and bring goodies in for us, I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind. I think that there is a whole another aspect to this teaching. You see, I think Jesus is talking about relationship. Relationship to others. Not contrast, not comparison. Relationship. There's a big difference. I mean, I could stand here, I could see myself as the slimmest, the youngest, the prettiest, or the ugliest, the fattest, the meanest, or the most talented or least talented. That's all comparison and contrast. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about relationship. Jesus always, always, always puts relationship first. When dealing with someone else, it must be about what makes them shine. What's important about them, how you respond and react to them. It must be about their comfort, not mine. It needs to be what helps make them to grow, not what makes me feel better. Now, this is a really hard thing. Self-preservation tells us that it's our face that must be saved. It's our reputation that has to be shiny and good. It's our traditions. It's our ways of life that have to be saved and cared for. But these are the attitudes that serve only ourselves. These attitudes do not follow the way of Jesus. These attitudes do not make us greater. They make us significantly less. The path that Jesus is leading the disciples on, even though they really don't seem to quite get it, is a path that leads to the cross. It's not a carefully polished golden cross that's set up on fine linen or set up on a beautiful wooden shelf someplace. It's not a cross, and I don't see one, it's not a cross painted on beautiful stained glass where the sun shines through and the colors take over the world. It's not that kind of cross. It's a hard, it's a rough, it's a dirty wooden cross. A cross that's stained with blood. When we truly give ourselves up to the room of grace, this is what we end up becoming. We end up becoming in the likeness of Christ, who went to the cross willingly. We end up not only learning to receive grace, we learn to regift grace. And in that regifting, we allow ourselves to die. Henry Nouwen wrote this: life is a long journey of preparation, of preparing oneself to truly die for others. It is a series of little deaths in which we are asked to release many forms of clinging and to move increasingly from needing others to living for them. If you don't know who Henry Nouwen is, he's well worth the read. He was a well-known professor, well-respected professor in both Yale and Harvard, who gave up those careers to live in community with the mentally ill and the physically handicapped. Feed them, to dress them, to change them, to bathe them. He was an incredible man. Well, I have one more story I need to share before I end this. We get a lot of different magazines that get sent into the church, freebies to hope that we'll buy them. And this one particular magazine is called Elle Magazine. And I was reading it this week, and they had a little article that had excerpts from this book called Tell Them a Story by Don Murray. This story personifies the teaching of Christ more than any story I have ever read. Barbara Brown Taylor tells the story of her nephew Will's birthday. Little Will was the center of everyone's attention, and he did a little dance until 7-year-old Jason charged over, put both hands on Will, and shoved him. Will fell very hard to the ground. He hit his rear end and then his head with a crack. He looked surprised at first, then put his head in his hands and howled, but not for long. His mother hugged him and helped him to his feet. First thing that Will did was to totter over to Jason. Will knew Jason was at the bottom of this thing, but because Will was new to meanness, he did what he had always done. He went up to Jason, put his arms around him, and put his head on Jason's back. That is what love is. Not a warm feeling between friends, but plain old imitation of Christ, who took all the meanness of the world, ran it through his body, repaying evil with good, blame with pardon, death with life. It worked once, and it can work again whenever God can find someone willing to give it a try. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all." He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, the one who sent me." Let's just take a moment of silence and let the Holy Spirit speak. Lord, it worked once. We pray that you will find someone here within these walls, within this church, that is willing